steadfast in thy word. Curve those who...
The Lord be with you. Welcome to our next 316 podcast. Today we're going to cover three letters, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. If you look in your Bible, you'll notice 2nd and 3rd John are both one chapter, so no 316 there. So we're really only going to cover one book, but I do want to start by talking about these three letters of John to address some of the things we might hear in our particular verse today. John probably wrote the most volume in the New Testament. Paul wrote 13 letters. John wrote 5, letters and books being synonymous in our situation. The Gospel, 3 letters, Revelation. John and Revelation are pretty big. The 3 letters are pretty small. So if you're just doing a strict word count, John and Paul, I think John's going to come out on top. But word count doesn't mean everything. John and Paul are giving us the same message, but they have different relationships with the church. You notice in Paul's writings, he frequently uses the term brothers in a generic way to include men and women. John writes typically of children, as if there's a father-child, parent-child relationship. Where would that come from? There are several reasons. Of the apostles, John lived the longest. He died of old age. His opponents tried to kill him. There's a story that they tried to boil him in oil. He survived. I might rather have died after that rather than live with those injuries. But he died of old age, the only one not to have been martyred. As we sometimes say when we talk about John, Saint Stephen, the Holy Innocents, right after Christmas, the Holy Innocents were martyrs in deed, but not in will. John was a martyr in will, but not in deed. Stephen was a martyr in will and deed. That idea is that John knew what Jesus had said, that the apostles would be hated because of the Lord, and that they would suffer. All of the apostles that John knew met horrible deaths. Crucifixions, beheadings, flayed alive. So John lived to an old age, so he could look at the church as a father. A more significant reason for the term children in the 3 letters of John is that John was the pastor of the church in Ephesus for about 30 years. That is a long time. I can count on one hand the number of pastors I know who have been in one spot for longer than 30 years. Think of what could happen in a 30-year relationship. Difficult church council and voters meetings, great celebrations that pastor could conduct the wedding of a couple, be with them at the birth of a child and the baptism of that child, then go on and confirm that child, and then conduct the wedding of that same child in a 30-year ministry. And it's not just pastor and people, but being laity within the congregation. Again, 30 years of celebration and struggle. Think of all the things that cause pain in a congregation. When you put sinful people together, sometimes sin is going to happen. And when you put Christians together who rely upon the grace of God, forgiveness is going to happen. Love is going to exist, and love covers a multitude of sins. So I first want to address how John writes letters to the family. In this case, as an elder in the family to his children. And he writes of love. In the 5 books from John's pen that the church has received, there are 3 words that keep cropping up: life, light, and love. When John writes to his children, he doesn't just call them children, he also calls them beloved children. And he writes about love and what life is. He writes about the Antichrist. And the Antichrist encourages darkness. John points to Jesus, who is the light of the world. We hear some of those things in the passage today. So that is a very, very general overview of John's writings. Of the 4 gospel writers, I probably love John the best. I just find his books so rich. You can mine so many jewels from John's writings. So I'm glad we could spend this time together looking at 1 John chapter 3. What I'm going to read for us is 16 through 18. Give us a little bit of context within a little section of this letter. Here is our reading. By this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. I see love and life. I do see the word brother. I also see John specifically addressing little children. So some of those things I covered in that broad overview are here. What I read for us today is John's encouragement for love. This letter was probably written between 85 and 100 AD. So we are 50 years past the life of Christ. All of the apostles, except for John, have died. Churches have been started. Paul is dead. John is writing, serving the church, encouraging them to love one another, and the difficulty in that. John has also written of the Antichrist in chapter 3, setting up the picture that there are the followers of Jesus and there are the followers of the Antichrist. And I have said so many times before, the Antichrist, the devil, Satan, he wants nothing good for you, for God's church. So, little children, let's focus on loving one another. How hard can that be? Well, our sinful nature gets in the way. But we know what love is because we see Jesus. We know love. Jesus laid down his life for us. That's beautiful. We ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. What are you asking of me? Sacrifice? Yes, sacrifice. But really to lay down my life for the others? Who knows what will happen? John is not encouraging recklessness, is not encouraging you to neglect your own needs. John is encouraging you to open your vision. Do not have blinders on, but see who is around you. And if there's a way that you can assist. If anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? John knew James. James writes for us that idea of faith and good works, and faith without works being dead. If you close your heart to your brother, how is God's love in you? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. A wonderful encouragement from the beloved disciple, St. John the Evangelist, reminding us that we know what love is, that Jesus laid down his life for us, and that in our living as Christians, we have opportunities to sacrifice for those around us. We have opportunities to receive help when we are in need. Not a sign that we are weak or helpless, but a sign that from time to time we may be in need. And God puts people in our lives who can help us. God puts us in the lives of other people so we can offer them a little help. We are brothers and sisters. We are spiritual parents. and children. We are part of the family of God. We love one another. Thanks for listening to this podcast. We're done with the 3 letters of John. Next comes Jude, then Revelation. Then we're all done. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Like, subscribe, share. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.